Hello gorgeous peeps, welcome to Tech Spurt Weekly, the weekly tech news show that, like your mum's OnlyFans channel, sees 90% of viewers switching off before I even open my mouth. And when I do open my mouth, whoops, there goes the other 10%. This week we'll be checking out a floppy Oppo, peeking inside a mental Huawei watch, and having a good hard procrastinate over Sony's upcoming Xperia 1 Mark V. That is, unless an aneurysm suddenly and mercifully explodes in my brain halfway through filming. Fingers, toes and other fleshy bits very much crossed. It's a busy show, so let's go! Tech Spurt Weekly! So this week's big sexy global launch was the Oppo Find N2 Flip, a dinky bendy blower that magically expands in your hand to a proud 6.8 incher. And unlike most of these foldable phones, I can actually just about flip it open one-handed and still look reasonably kinda graceful. Cool as f me. Just compare and contrast that with Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip 4. Oh, I've got it in there. Oh, I think I might have broken my thumb. The reason for this ease is Oppo's Flexion hinge, which still sounds remarkably rude when you say it a bit too quick. It's not as stiff as Samsung's effort, which yes means that the phone doesn't stand open quite as well, but it also means that the crease in that internal screen isn't as blatant either. You also get a ruddy huge cover screen with a proper aspect ratio for running apps. So it's a bit of a shame then that you can't actually run any apps on it. Although you can get snarled at by a malevolent bunny or reply to messages with some short, snappy pre-written statements, if you don't actually like the person enough to bother typing stuff. The Find N2 Flip also boasts enough grunt to run the latest games. You got superb battery life for a compact foldable and some pretty decent camera tech too, so overall I like it a lot. And a full unboxing review type jobby thing is live right now. And this week, Huawei also spaffed out a rather unusual smartwatch. Yeah, Huawei's latest smartwatch might be a proper chunkster, but that's because it conceals a nifty secret. So you can actually pop open that 1.43-inch AMOLED display to reveal a pair of earbuds lurking within. These sport a unique cylindrical design to fit snugly inside of that watch. You can control the buds from the watch, and despite their compact size, they actually pump some decent quality audio into your lugs with full active noise cancellation to drown out the rest of the world. It's certainly a very convenient design, and the buds are recharged when you bung them back inside of the watch. Unfortunately, this does impact the battery life of the watch itself, so you can only expect to get around 3 full days of life before the watch will need a recharge. That's still pretty good for a premium smartwatch, but compared with other Huawei watches, it is a bit of a letdown. And the Huawei Watch Buds also isn't water resistant. But you've got a gorgeous 1.43-inch AMOLED display, and all of the usual fitness tracking features if you're into all of that. I just absolutely adore how mental this thing is. It's like a proper James Bond watch, except if it was a James Bond watch, of course, instead of earbuds, it would probably have poisonous pellets or mini grenades or something. Or at the very least, you just bung a spare rubber Johnny in there. And I am hoping to bring you a full Huawei Watch Buds review at some point when all of the MWC craziness etc. calms down. But long story short, I do prefer the older Huawei watches without the buds in them because you get a good week or two of battery life between charges. That's the real strength of the Huawei watches compared with the likes of a Samsung watch or a Google Pixel watch, where you don't have quite so good battery life, but you do have the more dedicated Android support. You've got full notifications support etc. I mean, frankly, unless you're so ditzy you're constantly forgetting your true wireless earbuds, there's not really much of an advantage to have them just slapped there right on your wrist. And while that heralded the end of the shiny tech launches for this week, we were also gifted with a legit looking peek at Sony's upcoming Xperia 1 Mark V flagship phone. Top online leaky bloke on leaks showed off some renders of the new Sony smartphone, which perhaps unsurprisingly looks almost identical like last year's Xperia 1 Mark IV. It's unusually thin but also rather long, and it's not the contents of my pants. And yes, that 21:9 design means this 6.5 incher will be pleasing in the hand with the usual smooth glass finish. And chances are pretty bloody good that the Xperia 1 Mark V will be powered by Qualcomm's super snazzy Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, so hopefully won't get quite as toasty as last year's Xperia 1 Mark IV. And according to those rumours, it'll also be backed by a mighty 16 gigs of RAM, which is great news for gamers, especially as Sony will no doubt chuck in the usual fantastic set of gaming tools. And once again, it does look like the Xperia 1 Mark V will be one of the only flagship phones in 2023 that packs in a headphone jack. And on top of that, I'm also expecting a bit of hot and tasty micro SD memory card action, again a rarity at this sort of premium price point. Most of the other specs sound familiar too, including a 4K display and a 5000 mAh battery, suggesting that the Mark V will be a Galaxy S23 style gentle upgrade Possibly one to pass on if you do own last year's model. Although this could all turn out to be a massive bucket of bollocks with a generous side helping of arse biscuits, so who can tell. But you can bet both of your nipples that the Xperia 1 Mark V will boast some improvements in the camera department, as that's the bit that Sony really likes to shout about. Those rumours reckon we'll once again have a 12 meg primary and telephoto shooter, but the ultra-wide effort on the Mark V might be upgraded to 48 megs. The ultra-wide does seem like a bit of a strange choice of sensor to upgrade if these rumours are indeed accurate. Maybe they've got some sort of super duper macro mode on the new one, who knows, but I'm just a little bit confused as to why Sony isn't packing that almighty IMX989 sensor into the Xperia 1 Mark V, especially as the Xperia smartphones tend to struggle a bit at night time and in low light situations in general compared with a lot of other flagships. But hey ho, what do I know, I'm just some follically challenged moody bloke who can't even get a proper job. And one big question I'm often asked is, will Sony improve the camera's auto mode to make the Xperia 1 Mark V better for anyone who can't be asked to fanny around with those DSLR style controls? And I gotta say, I'm guessing not so much, as Sony really is marketing the Xperia smartphones at the enthusiast photographers rather than someone who just wants to snap their pie and chips and chuck it up on the Instagrams. But anyway, if all of that hot leaky chat has really pickled your onions, well, you better get saving now, because chances are pretty good the Xperia 1 Mark V ain't gonna be cheap. It'll probably cost you an arm, a leg, and at least a couple of kidneys. Thankfully, it also won't likely be released until around summer 2023, so that's plenty of time to find a not quite so dodgy back alley doctor who can rip out all of those precious, valuable, fleshy bits without wiring you up backwards, so you end up pissing out of your eyeballs. What would you guys like to see in the Xperia 1 Mark V? Definitely smash those comments down below and we'll try and get our way through as many of those as possible next week. And now it's time for the part of the show that makes me really wish that I did piss out of both of my eyeballs, because then I wouldn't be able to read this week's viewer comments. Viewer comments. So this week we are starting with Morel Mushy Peas, you're right sir, who says, nice of you to give a sort of shout out to our six-fingered friends in Carlisle. I'm sorry Carlisle, love you guys. Next up we got Darth Guantai, who says, sometimes I forget you're supposed to be a tech channel, not a whiskey tasting one. Yeah, supposed to be, that's the key part of that sentence there. Well, we've got some hot comment chat all about the OnePlus Pads tablet, which we covered in last week's episode. Leo Liberan, sorry, I completely f***ed that up, didn't I? Been looking for a smaller, not too expensive tablet to replace my slowly dying S5e, and the OnePlus Tab might be it. You gotta say, it does look pretty ruddy good, a solid all-rounder, and you know, it'd just be nice to actually have an Android tablet. Again, I haven't reviewed one of those in bloody ages. But yeah, as long as the pricing is right, of course. Pete says, pretty excited to see a new player in the tablet market, but I am not a fan of the name that OnePlus gave to its tablet, LOL. I mean, you can blame Apple for starting the whole pad naming convention thing. Tossers. And Pete continues, and also that giant camera on the back. It is a bit of a whopper, gotta say. Not sure why it has to be quite that big, considering it's just a 13 meg effort as well. And why put a camera on the back of a tablet anyway? Cameras on the back of tablets should be a crime punishable by a swift kick to the gonads. I mean, pop quiz, who is actually taking photos or shooting a video using a tablet? The answer, so if you release a tablet with a massive big old camera on the back, you're essentially saying this tablet is for. Of course, this is just my super grumpy personal opinion, and I could be completely wrong. There might be perfectly legitimate reasons to have a camera on the back end of a tablet as well as the front. If so, please do let me know in the comments. I'll try my best not to call you a. Next up, France Rondina says, the MSI Titan GT77 is freaking awesome. Absolutely, France mate, couldn't have put it better myself. If you haven't seen my MSI Titan unboxing review, hands-on, whatever the f it was, definitely go check it out. It's a lot more awesome than I just made it sound. John Paul Graham says, I've got an old Oki phone from back in the day when all you could do was call somebody. I don't even think texting had been invented, so no snake or anything presumably either. It had a pull-out aerial on top. Do you think it might be worth a few quid? That sounds like one for the Antiques Roadshow, mate. I got absolutely no idea. I mean, try bunging it on eBay, see what you get. James Kingman says, knee-deep in tech Spurt videos the past few weeks, you lucky mucky you. And I've decided to remortgage my flat and buy the S23 Ultra. I pray it lasts a minimum of 3 years. Well, I mean, as long as you don't accidentally, leave it on your driveway and back over it with your car, you should be all right. You'll still be getting those security and OS upgrades, and I'd be surprised if the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 was starting to get really creaky even after that length of time. Fraser Smith says, a recorder? You're lucky. I have 2 ukuleles to contend with. A proper bit of stereo experience for your oral torture. I mean, all I can say is thank the baby Jesus for noise-cancelling headphones, because they have made the last couple of weeks survivable, just about. But honestly, what the bloody hell are these teachers thinking, sending the kids home with stuff like this? In retaliation, I swear to God, I'm going to send my daughter into school with a water pistol filled with diarrhea. See how the buggers like that? Mal Mansouri says, do you think that the Poco F5 will once again have the Snapdragon 870 or go for the 8 Plus Gen 1 chip? I mean, the 870 has held up remarkably well. Those Poco phones are still pretty nippy, but surely at long last they've got to upgrade that chipset, right? They can't get away with just reusing it, the same one, every single time. The 8 Plus Gen 1 would be absolutely magnificent. You still get elite performance out of that thing. There's also talk about the Poco F5 coming with a Quad HD Plus AMOLED display running at 120 Hz, which is like, you got that, you got the premium performance, hopefully decent battery life and everything as well. Like, why would you spend £1,000 on a flagship? It's fucking mental. Obviously the camera tech won't be quite as good as those bitty big bollocks flagships. You won't have the likes of wireless charging and stuff, but whatever, good compromise if you haven't got much cash to splash. On the subject of internet porn, Ben Knight says, if we're talking late 90s internet, I imagine what you were watching probably took at least 6 of those 15 months to load, partly due to dial-up speeds being what they were, but also because the websites were probably packed with malware. Oh god, absolutely. Yes, I remember our old PC had more viruses packed in it than the waiting room of our local clap clinic. Every time I downloaded something, Norton used to absolutely shit its pants. And John Whitehead says, yes, early home internet brings back memories of waiting 6 weeks for something to download. I must have gone through 2 or 3 mouses with all of that clicking. Oh god, I used to be so slow. So slow. And I used to be a big fan of Kazaa. Did anyone else used to do the old BitTorrenting with that? I used to download lots of movies with that, but guaranteed every single time, instead of it being the actual movie that you wanted, when you open it up, what would you get? Scooby-Doo, the live-action version with Freddie Prinze Jr. So basically, some absolute wank biscuit would have a digital copy of Scooby-Doo, they'd rename it to Huge Wobbly Knockers 5 or whatever else, and then just sit there at their computer, rubbing their hands with glee as dumb dickheads like me downloaded Scooby-Bloody-Doo completely unawares. And yeah, if it only took like half an hour or an hour or something, it would have been annoying, but not much more. But just imagine being super horny for 2 full weeks while this thing downloads. And then instead of being presented with 90 minutes of glorious grade A Dutch bouncing baps, you're presented with a completely different pair of tits. Although in a weird roundabout kind of way, it actually worked, because after watching just a few minutes of that bloody god-awful movie, I then couldn't get it up again for several years. Jerry says, thanks Chris, now these videos have an extra purpose now that I'm nursing a broken arm. Oh no mate. Oh, awkward. Hope that gets better soon and hope it's not your wanking arm. Babe says, I know I've answered this in the past, but where do you get your wallpapers from? Can we get a link please? Thanks Uncle Spurt. Let's roll that jingle. Wall.alphacoders.com, wall.alphacoders.com. That's where my wallpapers come from. Wall.alphacoders.com. And I will try and remember to put a link in the description as well, but I'll almost certainly have forgotten, so frankly I won't even bother wasting your time looking. Taylor Bell says, why do you call phones blowers? It's just a good old bit of British slang really. I don't think it's just Northerners as well, I think it's a countrywide thing, but let me check out the origins on good old Google. Right, so apparently, according to the internet at the very least, the slang term comes from a mechanical precursor to the telephone, the speaking tube, each end of which was stoppered with a whistle. In order to attract the attention of the person at the other end, you took out your stopper and blew down the tube to make the other whistles sound. I mean, that just sounds like a heap of bollocks that some kids came up with in their back garden one day when they were bored. So yeah, I'm going to say that might be a whole heap of wank, just like most things on the internet to be fair. It does remind me though, I did actually get chatting to somebody on the MediaTek trip at the end of last year. Can't remember where he was from, but he said that in his country the word blower actually means a prostitute, which I guess makes kind of more sense, calling a prostitute a blower rather than a phone. But yeah, that would be a very different YouTube channel. In fact, I don't think Google would like that very much at all. Next up, Celotan Skate Organisation Production says, road to 1 million subscribers, Uncle Spurt. Yeah, I bloody know, right? I honestly, I feel drunk every time I stare at that subscriber number. And yes, smart arse, I know I usually am drunk anyway, but what I meant was like more drunk. Okay, well, we've really run out of time now, so I better make these the last couple of comments. Michael W says, maybe we should start a whip round for the inevitable liver transplant. I did actually have a health checkup at my GP's last Friday. No finger up the jacksie action or anything like that. Thankfully, it was just a bit of blood pressure and talking about my lifestyle choices. And when we got to the bit in the questionnaire about alcohol consumption, I may have slightly rounded it down just a smidge to 30 units a week. Although the nurse was absolutely appalled at that figure even, which is slightly concerning. But apparently I'm not too likely to drop dead of a stroke anytime soon, and my cholesterol actually isn't terrible, so I took that as pretty good news overall, celebrated with a weekend-long bender. A quick one to finish. Smithia says, how many hangovers have you had so far this year? I mean, who's counting? The problem isn't the number of hangovers, the problem is how long the hangovers last these days. I remember when I was a young'un, I used to, have a massive night out and then the next morning roll out of bed, knock back a Bloody Mary and I'd be back on top of the world, ma. These days, bloody hell, I might as well just take a week off work every time. Or, just film several videos about tech things, as is often the case. But anyway, a massive thanks to everyone who commented last week. I love you guys so much. They were brilliant as ever. Please do smash your comments down below. We'll try and get away through as many of those as possible next week. And speaking of next week,
this is about next week.
So next week, it's the big one, baby. MWC 2023, Mobile World Congress out in Barcelona. The biggest mobile tech expo event thing of the year, bar none. And the fact that it's in Barcelona means I'm not freezing my tits off every day like I am in this goddamn country. I'm actually flying out to MWC at the weekend right after I shoot next week's episode of Tech Spurt Weekly. And of course, we've got lots of stuff coming next week as well. More Galaxy S23 and S23 Plus shenanigans. Finally getting my mitts on those. PSVR 2 review. So please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell if you haven't done so already. Tell your mates to do the same because, hey, I'm sure there's a reason. Can't think of it right now. Come back to me on that one. Do have yourselves a bloody wonderful weekend, and that's it. Love you.